Welcome to Dissecting Deus Ex, an in-depth look at the themes, legacy, and design philosophy of the classic 2000 game. My name is Alexandra Orlando, and with me is my colleague Steve Wilcox, and we are game scholars whose work has been heavily impacted by the Deus Ex series. This video series is a casual commentary on the game as opposed to a video essay or complete Let's Play.
Yeah, so Alex, why do a video series on Deus Ex?
I think one of the first things that we thought when we were planning to do this video series is looking at the state of Let's Plays for Deus Ex, and what often I find is the case is that most of these Let's Plays actually skip the dialogue and don't go in depth with the conversations that are had. They're very much focused on getting through the game, the mechanics of the game, and we think it's really important to actually look at the dialogue and look at the story a little bit more in depth.
Yeah, what a novel idea. And I guess for me, there's the other side of this thing. So we're both game scholars. We've read pretty much everything out there that any game scholar has written about Deus Ex. It tends to get a lot of praise, but scholars don't necessarily dig into why it's praiseworthy or what's laudable about it and what's not. And so that's something we want to tackle in this video series as well, is to try and pull at those threads that other people have identified and see what we can unravel by playing through the game with the backgrounds that we have.
Yeah, so I thought I'd also ask you, Steve, what does this game mean to you specifically?
Yeah, so this game, academically, I find it very invigorating, but personally, it had a huge impact on me. So it came along, I'd say, just at the right time for me. It was released in 2000, and that was when I had just turned 15. And I would describe it as the first game that really treated me as an adult. So I'd grown up playing a lot of Zelda and Mario Kart, those sorts of things, and I love those games as well, but none of them really spoke to me like an adult, like a mature person. And Deus Ex might not seem mature from today's perspective, but some of the topics, some of the questions that the game posed really just spoke to me in a way that I felt respected, that a game had never really respected my intelligence before, and that really shaped how I viewed games and how I viewed the entire medium.
Yeah, that's a really great thing to bring up, and especially because when we think of mature games, we don't always think of intellectual games. Yeah. You know what I mean? It's like mature automatically means violence or nudity or something like that.
There's no M for mature for talking about Foucault.
No. Although that should definitely be, I think, on there.
F for Foucault.
Yeah. For me, I think one of the important things that I want to bring up is that it is a landmark game of the cyberpunk genre. And this is one of my favorite genres of media, despite the fact that I think it's very limited, both in its actual amount of key text and the lifespan is considered. So, there have been countless revivals and imitations of cyberpunk in general, but Deus Ex represents, I think, the cyberpunk game, like the quintessential cyberpunk game, and some may argue Shadowrun's also up there too, but I think that alone counts for something extremely monumental and definitely something worthy of praise in that regard.
Plus, the sunglasses that never come off, even though the entire game is at night, and the nice leather trench coats, that's just, right in there with the genre.
Yeah, absolutely.
Another thing that really speaks to me and what this game, what it means to me, and I think to others as well, is that the game has a lot of provocative, sometimes offensive, but mainly provocative ideas. And the way it expresses those ideas, I think, are equally as provocative. So at one point, the main character says, organized oppression leads to organized resistance. And I think it's just like a beautiful way of saying, if there's systemic oppression, that people will organize in order to combat that oppression. And then you compare that phrasing and the nuance there to even the latter day entries in the Deus Ex series. So Mankind Divided just came out, and one of the lines that the main character in that game says is, you treat people like animals long enough, and they start behaving like animals. And there's just a world of difference between those two things, right? One says there's organization against the oppressing us, and we're going to organize to resist that. The other is, it's just, I don't know, that's really condescending and it sort of demonizes resistance, and the other valorizes it. And I just felt that type of language and maturity and tone is just not something we see enough of, and even today in games, and this is 16 years after the release of Deus Ex.
And it's definitely this kind of stuff that we're going to be going in depth with. And I think, again, you see the lack of this kind of discussion in Deus Ex scholarship and in Deus Ex Let's Play. So, and this stuff matters. And I think that a lot of people don't think it does, but we're here to say that it does. And we're here to show you, I think, why, and why you should at least appreciate it. And speaking of appreciation, another point I'd bring up about why I love Deus Ex is that it has a lot of thoughtful writing, and you can tell that writing was a big part of this game. And as we talk through the series, I think we'll see how the writing in this game is solid, both with the dialogue and the extra textual elements, such as the newspapers or the books hidden around the game. And I say time and time again that writing in games is put aside in game development, both in the hiring of writers and where the writing is situated within the dev cycle. So anytime I see a game that actually has writing that speaks to me, writing that's thoughtful, I get so happy. And it's so rare even today to see such a sustained effort put into a game, especially one that is 40 hours long. How much writing went into this? How much voice acting? And that just tells you right there that, like, the effort was made, and we're not going to see games like this nowadays because you don't make 40-hour games anymore unless they're open world and you think of hours put into a game like that, but you just don't see it.
Yeah, and the way they implemented all that thoughtful writing too is a lot of it's just optional. If you find the world interesting and you want to dig a little bit deeper, it's there. It's not kind of forced upon you through cutscenes. It's kind of naturally integrated into the world. Yeah, that's great. And I think that thoughtful writing really plays into another element of the game that works quite well, and that's the delivery of that material. I think there's a beautiful tension in Deus Ex between what you're told to do and what you should do. And that tension, I think, is really hard to strike, but it's a really, really important one, especially not only in just games in general, but I think, as academics, we talk a lot about, the role of the player in the game and how much they bring to it. And is it the designer creating the experience, or is it the player that's kind of filling in that world on their own? And that's the kind of essence of games. But you look at other games have tried to explore that tension between what you're told and what you should do, such as, maybe BioShock. But I think that Deus Ex really accounts for and even encourages resistance to that kind of unquestioning obedience that BioShock kind of critiqued, but never allowed you to subvert as a player. It was just something that you had to kind of conform to. Whereas in Deus Ex, there's a lot of tension between what your employers tell you they want you to do, how they want you to behave, and what other tertiary and secondary characters tell you might actually be going on here, and entering a little bit of doubt into whether you should just blindly follow those objectives to the T, or whether you should question authority and explore other means, often in Deus Ex, non-violent means and non-confrontational means. And I think that's just a beautiful tension to put forward into a game.
And something I think we take for granted, and it's certainly interesting to go back and play this game for the first time if you haven't played it, and realize, like, how often you're going through those goals and not questioning what you do, or not thinking that you can't do anything else but, go here, talk to this person, kill this person. So I think that you'd be surprised what you question in these type of games. And kind of like a complete departure from this, I'd also say that another reason I like Deus Ex is because it is a rough play. Not only is it hard to get running, I think half the time, but this game is not perfect, and not just ideologically, but like technically. And I think that's what makes it even more special. And, not every badly made game is special, but it's these kind of little remnants of the past that kind of are enjoyable to me today. So, for example, the lip syncing, the bad accents, the environments, they just don't hold up to today's standard, not even a sort of retro way. And even though Deus Ex is considered one of the best PC games of all time, it still has a lot of aspects that are very indicative of those late 90s, early 2000s games. And I would even go so far to call it a B movie game. Very, very cheesy. And there's just moments where I think even in this video series where we just laugh, even though we've heard it over and over again, because it continues to be like just a little sparse of joy, I think.
Yeah, I think when I first played it, I had, and for a while afterwards, had some rose-colored glasses on about how serious it was. But now that we're replaying it here, which I think is my 6th time replaying it, it's pretty damn cheesy.
Yeah. So for a little bit of the format that we're going to be going through with this video series, for the sake of time, because again, this is a 40-hour game, we are playing an aggressive playthrough, but we both agree that the game is best played stealth. We, I think, tend to prefer stealth playthroughs when we're playing Deus Ex. But you will see us killing people and just to get through things and get to some of the talking points we need to get through.
Yeah, and another thing is we're not going to play all 40 hours of the game. We've highlighted areas that are particularly interesting and provocative and I think worthy of unpacking that haven't really been addressed in other formats, and so that's what we're really looking forward to doing. In order to do that as quickly as possible, though, we also have cheats enabled so that we're in God mode here, and so just to let you know, if you have never played Deus Ex before, it doesn't play anything like this at all. And actually, it's not even at its best when you play it this way. I think it's better when you're more cautious and more thoughtful in how you pursue your objectives. But because we're interested mainly, I think, in the conversations and the scenarios rather than the actual combat and gameplay itself. So we're kind of using these ways to expedite the commentary.